I hope 5 o'clock is the magic hour, and not that people are like, oh, that guy's bad.
It might be that they're not going to understand. I mean, the people who didn't.
I would think that I'm a good deliverer of messages that I could, but whatever. All right, I've already asked you guys who you are. I think there's a good cross-section from the last ones. Tom talked about TypeKit, right? Okay. All right. So we might be shorter than I expected. Adobe's done a whole bunch of stuff within the HTML space in the last few months. Especially, and it's especially important to get this out because Adobe has this reputation of not working well with HTML because of stuff that's happened with Apple and whatnot. So it's important for us to talk about what we've done in the HTML5 space, specifically around developers in the last few months. The first thing, as Tom talked about, we acquired TypeKit. We also acquired Adobe, who are the makers of PhoneGap. Does anyone here work with PhoneGap at all? Okay. So I'll talk a little bit more about that, and they're working with us. We're really excited to have them on board. We also released a new preview of Edge. Anybody here know what Edge is? Okay. I'll be showing that off. Hopefully that'll kind of whet your appetites. And the last thing is we submitted CSS Shaders to the W3C. And that is a cool bit of technology that I'm going to show off. Hopefully it works without a hitch. It's very experimental, which is why I'm prefacing. I'm setting the expectation. This is cutting edge stuff. So if I screw it up, like, oh well, it's cutting edge stuff, right? So I'm going to skip through the TypeKit stuff, as you guys already know what the deal is with TypeKit, and I'll go straight to jQuery Mobile. So jQuery Mobile. Why is Adobe talking about jQuery Mobile? Well, does anybody here work with jQuery at all? Okay, so jQuery Mobile. Okay, all right. So jQuery, as you guys may know, is a framework that makes kind of JavaScript less of a pain in the ass. Is probably the best way of describing it. Basically, it makes a lot of stuff that I know I'm going to trip over this at some point, so if you see me high-stepping, I apologize. And if I fall, if it's funny, laugh. But if I'm seriously hurt, get attention. So jQuery is a library that helps make JavaScript a little bit more accessible. Things you commonly have to do, instead of making it take multiple lines of code and long strings of code, it takes very short bits of time, and it's a lot easier to maintain. jQuery Mobile is a framework that builds a UI on top of that, and that UI is targeted at mobile devices. So why use jQuery Mobile? So here is a mobile scheduler that I built for a conference I attended. Pretty basic. Everyone does this, right? You have a conference, you need a schedule for it, you make it an app, and you have all this stuff. You have a list, you have tabs, you have a header at the top. I mean, it's pretty basic mobile development, right? So I rolled this version. I rolled my own, right? I did it myself by hand, pure craft, HTML, no framework. And to get that fixed position toolbar at the top, it took a little bit of work, and then I had to add margins to this list in order to make it flow right around that, because that's fixed. And so if I didn't fool around with that, the list would come up under the schedule. I had to make sure that my A-links took up the entire tab here, instead of just the text, and that took a little bit of work to do. Then the fixed position toolbar doesn't work in Android yet at all because of a bug with Android's browser. And then there's a little issue with the default link not working properly, so I do some Ajax to make it work. And all in all, this comes down to, and also it still doesn't display right after all of this. So. And it doesn't work on all mobile browsers. So doing it yourself sucks, is kind of the moral of this story. Especially if someone else has done it for you. And that's kind of the whole point of using frameworks. So here's the jQuery mobile version. Instead of having to fiddle around with making that toolbar work, I just said data role equals header. Data role equals footer. And the framework handled this for me. Made this a list view. That handled it for me. No Ajax was required. The entire app is actually one HTML document. And I'll say multiple pages, but it's not actually multiple HTML pages. It's actually just multiple subsets of content that jQuery calls a page. But it's actually just one giant HTML document, which is good because it means you only have to download it once. There's a little bit of a load, but every other thing happens pretty quickly and whatnot. Oh, and it works perfectly in many browsers. Let's say at this point, probably most of them. And it gracefully degrades in most of the rest. Obviously, it's not going to gracefully degrade if someone's using, I don't know, a BlackBerry browser from 2008, but I really hope you're not. So jQuery makes this stuff easy. And jQuery has a huge ecosystem. Whenever you want to do something in jQuery, before you do it, you look to see if someone else has done it, and 9 times out of 10, someone else has done it, made a plugin for it, you can just download it and use it. So let's get started with jQuery Mobile. Now, oh wow, okay, so the contrast is actually pretty good. You guys read this in the back? Okay, good. Sometimes I was worried because the whites were getting a little washed out, and I was afraid that this would just be completely unreadable, but it seems like it's good towards dark, so that's good. All right. So this is the top of a jQuery mobile page, right? You notice the doc type declaration, doc type HTML. That kind of signals that this is an HTML5 document. It doesn't have one of those long giant strings that is previous versions of HTML. I just do 3 things here. I pull in the style sheet, which is the CSS for jQuery mobile. I pull in jQuery, the vanilla jQuery 1.6.4, and then I pull in jQuery mobile, and that's it. I have that top of my page, and I'm all set. Page model is pretty straightforward. Everything in jQuery mobile is done through these data roles. So data role equals page. That's going to say this is one viewport. This is one screen on my app. And then I have a header, a content, and footer sections. Header is going to correspond to that top bar. Footer is going to be a bar at the bottom. And then content is just going to be the stuff that makes up my page. It's important to note that this stuff is here for you, not you for it, right? So if you want to use it, use it. If you don't want to use it, don't use it. It obviously makes stuff easy for you, but you don't have to, every page doesn't have to have a header. You know, for example, if an app you're designing, you're focusing on Android users, a lot of Android apps don't have that top bar because top bar is where you put kind of stuff that you normally do on the physical buttons on an Android device, so you wouldn't necessarily need that top bar. So there's things to keep in mind. You don't have to do all of these. So then I have multiple pages. Each one of these pages is its own screen within the app. You'll see each one has an ID, and that's how I navigate to it. That helps me say this is the landing page, this is the detail page, this is the map page. And I'm going to pull up a demo of this in a bit. If some of this is going by, don't worry, I'm going to demo it. Navigation is pretty straightforward. You'll see that the href there goes to #map. So that's how I navigate between the different pages. If I want to have a back button, I just say data add back button equals true, and then a little back button will appear in the toolbar. I don't have to specifically create one or program one. If I want to make one of those, big chunky lists, I just call it a list view. That's it. If I want a nav bar at the bottom, I just call it a nav bar. Create another list. Forms, you'll see this form is just straight HTML. I actually don't have to manipulate it at all, but I'm going to pull it up in a second and demo this, and so you see the effect of all this stuff. But I just wanted you guys to see the code for it first. So now I'm going to go through and actually create this stuff. So I'm also going to be cheap and go back and copy and paste this stuff from my Prezzo instead of making you watch me type this stuff, because that gets incredibly boring. Okay. So let's go to a tool here and Codeworks demo. Okay, so I've pre-populated this with a couple pages, and I'm going to focus here on my first page, which is empty. And right, you spell Mizzou with the Z's, right? Not the S's. Just making sure. Like it's one of those things. For those of us that don't spend a lot of time here, it's unintuitive. I apologize. So here we go. Here's my app, and I'm going to kind of scrunch this down to sort of be mobile-y in size. Okay, that's my app. Not a lot going on, right? Because I didn't actually do anything. So let me drop div data role equals content, and I'm going to drop that list in here. The first thing I'm going to do is show you it without the data role here. So no data role on this. And I just have a list of links, right? All right, but if I put that data role back, refresh, boom. I've got a nice, pretty list of things. If I go through, I click on them, it goes to the next one. Now, a couple of things to notice here. You'll notice that I didn't tell it to do any sort of transition. It's just automatically doing that transition for me. But that transition signals to the user something has changed. We've gone to another state. These are kind of important UI things to do. jQuery Mobile will just handle them for you. Now, obviously, the next thing that comes in is like, well, what if I don't want that transition? What if I want to signal it going down? You absolutely can change the direction of transitions. You do your own transitions, whatever. But from the start, jQuery is going to handle this stuff, and I think in the way that's most that most other sites are using it. That's an important rule of UI in general. Is 99% of your users' time is spent somewhere else. So keep with what other people are doing, and obviously you can break that rule, and you should break that rule, but you gotta know the rule first before you break it. You know that story by now probably. All right, so this is real basic. I don't want to get into too much stuff, but I also want to show you the effect of a form in jQuery Mobile. So here's that form, a basic, vanilla HTML form. I'll drop it in here. So nothing too crazy. It's just basically a login prompt. If I go back to this page, you'll see that it's, I know it's a little washed out, but you can kind of see that I've got nice, big, chunky inputs, and I've got a nice, big, chunky button for pressing. So keeping in mind this is mobile, it's supposed to be big, it's supposed to be really easy for people to interact with, and jQuery Mobile is just going to handle that for you and not make you do too much work on that. So that is kind of a brief introduction to jQuery Mobile. Obviously, it's an iceberg, right? There's books written on jQuery Mobile, but hopefully that just sort of whets your appetite. Now, wow, okay, that wasn't what I expected to happen. But luckily it was it, not me falling. So theme roller. So a lot of times people see this and say, yeah, that's great, but like, am I stuck with that view you had, that kind of color scheme? Actually, that color scheme on those apps was a custom one I've done, and I did it with Theme Roller. You want your own design. Theme Roller allows you to do that. So basically, if you want, all the jQuery Mobile stuff, all the look and feel stuff is done through CSS, and you can go in and edit that CSS by yourself, but it's bulky, it's pretty crazy. Doing it by hand is really painful. What this will do will create your own CSS looks for jQuery Mobile, and you can kind of publish them from this, save it from this. You'll see, you basically go through, you'll hit on a button and say, I'd like to change this blue to something else, I'd like to change this font to something else, and it'll help you go through and do that. And that, I'm happy to say that Adobe was the one who did the work on this. So we gave jQuery Mobile an engineer and just said, have them do Theme Roller. So we're kind of proud of that. If you want to take the next steps with jQuery Mobile, obviously go to jQueryMobile.com. And again, I'll have this presentation actually is already up online. So if you go to my SlideShare account, it's already there. So you don't have to copy down these links. But jQuery Mobile and the documentation is actually done in jQuery Mobile. It's very meta, right? It is its own documentation, kind of crazy. It's really well done. It kind of explains all this stuff. And then Theme Roller is just jQuery.com/theme roller. Before I move on, do you guys have any questions about this stuff, about jQuery? jQuery Mobile? No? Okay. All right. The next thing I want to talk to you about is Edge. Edge is an animation tool that we have for doing animations in HTML5, for those of you that hear the first section. So it's technically HTML5, but it's not really, but it is. It's a really painful explanation of it, and I'll explain as I go through. So we're used to this sort of interface for HTML, right? If you've got some text, HTML, basically at the end of the day, HTML content is mostly text, so dealing with it from a text perspective makes a lot of sense. But when you start to do animations in HTML, you start to get crazy stuff like this, where you have, like, each one of these is some sort of transition, and I'm doing this multiple times, because each individual property is transitioning over time over this, right? Background colors, box shadows, translate, like all of this crazy stuff is changing over time. And this is a relatively minor one. Once you start to get in with complex animations, or even like not very complex, but just take longer than 1 second animations, you get a lot of this. And we've discovered, kind of going back and forth over this, we wanted to make a tool for doing this, to handle animations. And you guys might know Adobe's known for Flash. And so we struggled with this for a long time. How can we do this that makes sense in the HTML world where this really is, it's hard to see, this is a timeline, right? Timelines are really the best way of looking at animation because you're changing things over time. Timelines really make that work. And we fought it for a long time and realized, no, it's a timeline. We need to do it timeline-based. So we created a tool that allows you to do timeline-based animation in HTML and HTML5. So I'm just going to show this tool off because I think it speaks for itself. And let me call that up. Okay, so let's create a new one. Let's see here. All right, got a drawing area, a timeline down below. Let's start making something happen. Let's start drawing something here. I'm going to bring in an image. This is the easiest way to show this, and this is from a presentation I did at a different conference, or just a conference. It's a symbol for the conference. His name's Punchy. So I want to animate this. What I'd like to do is have him come in off of the side, off of the, kind of enter this scene. So I've got my 2 pieces of tooling down here. This is, there's the engineers for Edge are really, they're very semantic. They're like, no, that's not called the dragging thingy, which is what I tend to call it. It's the playhead, and then there's the mark, and whatever. Okay, so there's this thing you drag, and it's the playhead. It's what's playing at the current moment, and then the mark is where you'd like the animation to go to. So I'm going to put the playhead down here and the mark here, and say I eventually want Punchy to be there. That's where the mark is. But when the playhead starts, I'd like him to be off screen. Okay? So now if I go and play that animation, he slides through. Okay? Pretty simple, pretty easy, pretty straightforward. But it's a circle. So it'd be kind of nice if it rotated in instead of just kind of wheeling in. So let's do that. Let's change the rotation to negative 720. The right way? It's either 720 or negative 720. Yep, negative 720. So he rolls in. But that motion is sort of not very natural, right? It's not the way things actually move. So it'd be nice if I could kind of change the way it moves. And so what I can do is an easing. Basically, easing is change the rate at which you move over time. And then if there's based on equations and whatnot. The only ones you really use in this are elastic and bounce, and I think those are the ease in, sometimes squat, whatever. I'm going to use an elastic. Trust me, that's the way to do it. Ease out elastic. What that means is do an elastic move and have the elasticity towards the back of the transition. So now that motion should be like that. It kind of bounces in, rotates in. And because they're synced up, the rotating and the moving forward bounce kind of happens at the same time, and it looks really natural and really kind of straightforward. So that is kind of the first thing. I'm going to take this demo and go a little bit further with it because it's got some cool stuff in it. So we'll go edge 2. Okay. So here we are. We're a little bit further along. Let me play the whole thing for you. And an important thing I haven't really shown you here is that this actually will run within the browser, right? There's Chrome. There it's running. I already did that. So a little bit more animation. This is all done with Edge, obviously. What I wanted to have happen here is that, let's see. So a little bit of interactivity, right? So I touch that button, and it moves on. So what I did here was I added an action to that button that said, when I press that button, play Enter Punchy. Okay? And enter punchy corresponds to this moment here on the timeline. So basically, and then here I tell it to stop. So at this moment, stop. So what happens is the animation loads up and it plays until that stopping point. And when I click the button, the animation continues. And that's how I can add interactivity to an edge composition. So click on that, flies out, rolls back in, and we're there in New York. Okay, so that's just the basic demo. I want to show you a couple things I've created, other people have created with Edge, keeping in mind that all of this was done with this tool. So let's kind of fall back here. So, Edge demos. Nope. Okay, seem to have lost those demos. So I've got a couple other ones though. So the first one is this. This is really kind of cheesy, but this is a little demo of the Zodiac, and it's interactive. Wow, you can't see this guy up here at all. There is a symbol there. It's just completely washed out. The contrast isn't that great. You see I click on one of these, and a little bit more appears. Now, oh, I'm double clicking too fast. There we go. So basically the idea here is I could build something interactive. I fade everything out. I just show Gemini, we've gone Latin, and I can show you what it means in sort of a more realistic way compared to the symbol. Now, one of the things you might notice is that font is kind of stylized. That's because this demo is actually using Typekit. So I'm able to combine an Edge demo with Typekit so that I can use custom fonts and do this animation all at the same time. So I can do really kind of rich interactive things. The last one I want to show is this one. Okay. Here's the same thing. I've actually taken that Edge demo from the beginning, fleshed it out a little bit more, and included it within a website, right? So, and you'll see here that I'm pulling in more types from Typefont, and that's these specific fonts here, and that is a font from Typekit. So I'm basically able to take HTML animations, include them in a normal site. So I've got my normal site here with all this extra information, but that demo that was running, a little bit of extra oomph, and you can't, I'm sorry, it's washed out, but a city pops up in the background to kind of show off New York. And then you'll notice here that there's like a red shadow going on in these letters, that's right. But basically I'm able to do a little bit more expressivity with this tool than just a straight simple demo. It's now part of the site, does stuff. So that is my overview of Edge. Do you guys have questions about that? No? Is this cool? Is this something that's interesting to you guys? Okay. All right, cool. If you want more information about Edge, write down this ridiculously long URL or just download the presentation at the end. And now I'm going to talk. So that I kind of went sort of develop. I kind of switched this talk back and forth. I do Typekit for designers, and then go to jQuery mobile for developers, and then go back to Edge for kind of a design kind of viewpoint. Now I'm going to go back to the developer realm and talk about PhoneGap. So has anybody here fooled around with PhoneGap? I saw a couple people last session. Okay. So what's our relationship with PhoneGap? So Nitobi is the company that came up with PhoneGap. We bought them. PhoneGap is going over to Apache. It's got some sort of Apache name now, so that it remains open source, and so Adobe doesn't, seem like they're stomping on an open source project. And we're going to focus on tooling around PhoneGap. Specifically, PhoneGap Build is one of the things I'm going to show off today. Why PhoneGap? What is the cool thing? What is PhoneGap good for? So in a lot of cases, we have a web app, an app that works within a mobile browser that works really, really well. But we're told we need a native app. Why do we need a native app? Well, sometimes it's pieces of functionality that just aren't available through a mobile browser, like the camera or the compass or the accelerometer. Sometimes it's just you get the directive, we need an app. Well, why do we need an app? It has to be an app. But we don't have to have it be an app. No, it's got to be a native app. All right. So whatever the politics, whatever's going on, why would you want PhoneGap? It's basically, it gives you the ease of web development with the access of native. The idea here is that you can be sold in the store. You can access elements on the phone that aren't available to a web browser, while at the same time still programming everything with web languages, HTML, JavaScript, CSS. So that's what PhoneGap is designed to do. PhoneGap packages a web app into a native app, another use of air quotes. What do we mean by native apps? So we mean that these apps can be distributed in stores, right? They create a file that, like if you're a Android developer, it's an APK file. If you're an iOS developer, it's an IPA file. It creates those native files. They can be distributed that way, but the UI is not entirely native. And this makes sense, right? If you're building the UI in HTML, then unless you specifically make that HTML look like a native app, it's not going to be native. This is a point that sometimes people get kind of focused on, and it's difficult. So UI is not native, but it's still an app, and you're cool and ready to go. Now, PhoneGap is great, but there's one kind of giant problem with it, which is we did all this work so that we wouldn't have to we wouldn't have to be an Objective-C developer, we wouldn't have to be a Java developer, whatever you program Windows Mobile in .NET, you wouldn't, whatever it is. You wouldn't. We don't want to do that, right? We want to work in HTML, JavaScript, CSS. But the problem with PhoneGap is that basically you have to still package the app with the platform's tools. So if you want to use an iOS, if you want to make an iOS app, you have to download Xcode and use Xcode to publish your PhoneGap app, which is it's a decent workflow and it's got some advantages. But I think for a lot of times it's like a big deal breaker with people. So enter PhoneGap build. Okay, so pain point, lots of different software you have to download to develop whatever platform you want to develop in. You know, we live in the future. It would be great if you could just take all this HTML, JavaScript, CSS, put it into a box, and out of that box would come packaged apps. If only it had wow, I'm losing it now. If only I had some sort of iconography that would exactly explain that concept. Enter PhoneGap build. So what PhoneGap build is, it's a cloud solution, right? So you take your app, you take your files, and you upload them to a cloud, and the cloud compiles them for you. So basically, you set up build. If you're signing your apps, which you often have to do on these platforms, you still have to get your certificates. You give them the PhoneGap build, your provision files on the iOS side, and then you get your code up there. You either upload it, or my preferred way of doing it, which is link it to a Git repository. And then you have the servers build the app files for you. Now, I'm not going to do a whole huge demo of this other than to kind of show off the interface and show you how this stuff works. So here I have an app in GitHub, right? It's just a simple jQuery version of that scheduler I have. And here I have my PhoneGap build directory. And if you look, there you go. You'll see that I've got a link between that file and GitHub, between this setup and GitHub. So I go through, and without having any of the code tools installed on my machine, I'll just tell PhoneGap build that I updated my app. And it's crazy. Whenever there we go. Sometimes this is slow, but basically what it did is it went out to GitHub, got a new version of the code, pulled it down, and now it's going through and compiling. So we go back to the main page, we'll see that iOS is unhappy because I don't have the provision files for it. That's fine, I know that. BlackBerry's ready for what that's worth. Go back through. WebOS, great. The one I really want, you're not done yet. Oh, good, Symbian. Come on. Android, for some reason, it's open source and it's Java, and it should take no time at all. And it really doesn't take that much time to compile these apps. The Android clearly is taking a little bit longer. It takes about a minute for the whole cycle from it uploading the full stuff to having Android ready. Oh, come on. It's only because I said I needed you, right? All right, it usually takes about a minute, unless I'm demoing it, in which case it's completely unpredictable. But long story short, I get a little button here that says APK. They can download. I can either take a browser and go right to this page and download the APK and install it on my mobile device and test it, or I can suck it down. And I've got some. I personally have a script that I'll attach my phone, and I'll just hit. This does everything via ant, just pulls it all down. One more time. There we go. Woohoo! Usually that's like lightning fast. Android is usually the last one, but it still usually does not take that much time. So I guess 5 o'clock is a bad time to be doing this. But there you go. You see that I have an app now. I have an APK file. If I had the provision files, I have an IPA file. I have all this stuff set up and ready to go, and I don't have to have any of this stuff installed on my machine in order to get compiled versions of these apps on the various platforms. So really, really makes this type of development a lot easier and a lot better. So that is PhoneGap Build. If you have any questions about it, obviously PhoneGap's the place to start. PhoneGap Build start, and then PhoneGap build.phonegap.com. And before I go forward, any more questions? Any questions about PhoneGap? Throwing a lot of different things at you. Okay. So the last thing I'm going to talk about is some experimental stuff that we're doing. As someone who works for Adobe, this has been the shitstorm that my last 18 months has been. This whole problem of HTML versus Flash Player. Now that Adobe has embraced HTML, and not that we never didn't, but now that at least we've made the right media plays in order to say that Adobe, despite the fact we were always pretty pro HTML, now we're really pro HTML. Now I feel like I can say with a certain honesty that HTML5 is awesome, but it lacks capabilities that Flash Player has. It's just the way it is. They're different tools, they're different technologies, they have different abilities. So one of the things that we've been wrestling with at Adobe is, well, we want to make the web better. We want to make people. I mean, our whole mission or vision, for lack of a better way of putting it, is we want to get people to be able to create content wherever they need to go. And so, what if we could take some of that Flash IP and bring it to browsers? What if we could basically take parts of the Flash Player, pull them out of Flash Player, convert them over to the language, the underlying code that browsers are based on, and put them in the browser so they run as part of the browser. And so that's what we've done. And CSS Shaders is, I think, one of our initial kind of segues into this. CSS Shaders are cinematic effects for the web. What does this mean? Well, let me show you it in action. So let me load Chromium here. Now this is not Chrome that you can download yourselves. This is a special Adobe build of Chrome. Okay, not a big deal. So you can't just download this. This is all experimental. We submitted it, but it's not in browsers in a place by you anytime soon. So let me figure out where this is supposed to be pointing. There we go. Okay, cool. All right. So the first thing I want to show off here is, let's see. Okay. So here's a flipbook designed with CSS Shaders. Simple book. As I scroll through, you'll see that the pages are going to fly out of the way. Right? Kind of crazy. You don't normally see that. That's being done with CSS Shaders. It's basically folding it through three-dimensional space as it pulls it off. If we look at the underlying code, there's obviously some CSS in here, but the content, all LIs and divs, and it's all content, right? It's all HTML just being manipulated through three-dimensional space using CSS Shaders. Nothing too crazy, but really kind of solid. And all of these shaders are actually working. So for example, here's some video. That video is still going to play even after it flips, and you'll see that it's running as it flips up. So we're moving this stuff through three-dimensional space. This animation is still playing. That music gets on my nerves, so I'm getting rid of it. But long story short, all this content, all this kind of intense content is still playing as we go through this field. So that's one. Let me show you another one. Waterfall. Okay, so this is a, let's see. This is just a display of tweets. You'll notice that I can highlight them. This is all just, again, LIs. I'm scrolling through it, and I can now rotate this through three-dimensional space. And again, this is all happening with CSS and HTML. There's nothing else going on here, except the shader language, which is its own language, and I'll talk about that in a second. But long story short, I'm able to take this piece of the DOM, manipulate it through three-dimensional space, but I can still copy and paste from it, even though it's rotating, although it's a little bit hard on a track point to manage. But I can still manipulate this through three-dimensional space. Yes?
Just to be clear, when you said this is all dependent on browser software working as input at some point, right? I mean,
yes, so this is not
a version of the browser that eventually
yes. Yeah, I'll tell you where all that stands at the end of this. I think that's interesting. So that's that one. And then let me show you the last one I'm going to show. Because all the rest of that, like, that's content I control, right? That's all stuff like it's all pre-canned stuff. So let me show you this. This is inspired by the Marauders map from Harry Potter, right? So I'm going to unfold this, and this is a live Google map pointing to, where's this pointing to? I'd be careful. I was like, I often say, like, in the middle of nowhere, we scan out, and we're like, is this Missouri? Kansas. All right, well, that's cool. We can call Kansas middle of nowhere? All right, cool. So you can see this is a live Google map. I'm gonna scroll into my hometown, and I'm gonna do this for an important reason, not just hometown jingoism. But there we go. We'll see. There's where I live, Philadelphia. And now I'm going to refold up the map, and you'll see that you can still see. I can see it clearly on the screen. I don't know if you can see it clearly there, but it's still there. Like, this map is still live. It's still running, even though I folded it up within three-dimensional space. And I don't control the content that's coming out of this. That's a Google map, right? So this is working with other things. You can do very, very complex things with it. What do you guys think of this stuff? Is this crazy? All right. That's what I like to hear. Where does all this sit, right? So what we did is we did this in Chromium, which is the open source version of WebKit. And we said to WebKit, hey, here's our code. We'd like to submit it back. And there's a process. You can't just randomly, put stuff up. So it takes a little bit of time. But we actually have one of these CSS things already in, CSS regions, which is another thing that we've been working on. And that actually is now currently shipping in Chrome, and IE is supporting it. And so this is helping us we're working with the browser manufacturers. So right now it's out. Like, the browser manufacturers can choose to pull it in and use it or not. They most likely will, but it's going to take a little bit of time. And so normally when someone from Adobe is saying, like, well, it's up to browser manufacturers to do that, right? It's passive-aggressive nonsense because we're trying to push Flash. But we are actually just waiting for the browser manufacturers to do it. But we have a pretty good relationship with them. We actually work with the Chrome team. We get a lot of really positive feedback from them, so they're most likely pulling this in. We've gotten as much positive noise as is possible to get out of Apple. So that I take as an encouraging sign. IE has said that they're going to put some of the stuff that we submitted in version 10, which is the previous stuff, the region stuff that I didn't talk about here, but this is coming. So this is some of the stuff that we're working on, and we're working with browser manufacturers to make sure that pieces, and all of this came from Flash, right? This is all work we introduced into Flash Player about 5 years ago to do this, and we basically just pulled out the IP and brought it over. So hopefully this is coming to a browser near you soon. So with that, that's actually the end of my formal remarks. The presentation is actually up on SlideShare. And again, if you want to contact me, terry.ryan@adobe.com or terrenceryan.com or tbryan on Twitter. But I'm open up to questions. Anything. Right? What's up? Awesome. Well, thank you guys for sticking around. And I'll be around if you have questions.